Hello, everybody. I'm just coming in here to talk about something, if that's okay. I know that I said in the previous video that I would be making a reaction video to the Oscar nominations, that I would be talking like I did last year about what got in, what didn't, and for some reason I realized I don't really have any motivation to make that video. And don't get me wrong, there are some very good films nominated. There are a lot of nominations that I like and some that I don't. But for some reason, just going down the lineup of things that were nominated and things that weren't didn't seem very appealing to me. Especially because I feel like I would just dedicate the vast majority of the video to one singular topic, which is why I decided to just abandon the whole thing altogether and focus on this topic for a video. And for the record, this topic is not what many people are reacting to, which is the snubs of Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie. And it is interesting from an Oscar pundit standpoint. We always knew that those snubs were possible, and seeing people have the reactions that they did, honestly, it is making me think that we could be looking at an Argo situation where the backlash against the director nomination is so strong that it compels the movie to a potential Best Picture win. Just want to all of you who are angry about that, I want to let you know that I think that is a legitimate possibility. But today I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what happened with the Best Animated Feature Film category, and specifically Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now, some of you may remember that there was a portion of the year where it did seem very possible, even likely, that this movie was going to receive a Best Picture nomination. And even as those expectations faded over time, there was still hope going into the nominations that it was at least going to get something more than animated feature, that it was going to get score, maybe visual effects. It ended up not getting anything. It ended up only getting the Best Animated Feature Film nomination. And this in and of itself wouldn't be so noteworthy if this wasn't the second consecutive year that this happened. Because last year, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, when that movie came out, people were legitimately hyping this film up as a Best Picture contender. Not only did it not get Best Picture, it got animated feature and nothing else. As a matter of fact, both this year and last year, we do not have a single animated film represented outside of the animated feature film category. Now, what I mean by that is most years we get some recognition of animated films in other categories. When it happened last year, I commented that this was the first time it had happened in a decade. It hadn't happened since 2012. And just to go over real quickly, 2013 Frozen and Despicable Me get nominated for song. 2014 Lego Movie gets in for song. 2015 Inside Out gets in for screenplay. 2016 Moana and Trolls get in for song, and Kubo gets in for visual effects. 2017 Coco gets in for song. 2018 Isle of Dogs gets in for score. 2019 Frozen 2 and Toy Story 4 get in for song. 2020 Soul gets in for score and sound, and 2021 Encanto gets in for song and score, while Flea gets in for international feature and documentary feature. So most years we get something. That was 9 years in a row in which at least one animated movie got a mention somewhere, and sometimes it's just a throwaway nomination, and you can totally argue that animated films deserved more than the nominations that they got, but there was always something. And the fact that we have now gone 2 years in a row where no animated film is represented outside of the animated feature film category. And it's easy to say, oh, that's what the category is there for, except you look at what happens with international features and how recently the Academy has gotten really, really good at nominating international films across the board. We've 5 of the past 6 years, we've gotten an international feature in the Best Picture category. And the downside of that is that it makes international feature very easy to predict, but that is a small price to pay for recognizing great cinema, which is what the Oscars are supposed to do. And so, here's the thing. I wouldn't be making this video, because this is a topic that I've been struggling with for a long time. I wouldn't be making this video if Spider-Verse had just gotten something, or if Boy and the Heron or Elemental had gotten that nomination and score instead. Because I usually don't like to use the word snub. Obviously, there's only 5 slots in most categories, and there's always going to be more than 5 worthy achievements. So I get that. You can't nominate everything. You just can't. But it just really sucks that they keep doing this over and over and over with animated movies in particular. And I think in order to give you a bigger context here, I don't think I've ever actually talked about my Oscar origin story on this channel, and this is something they talk about a lot on This Had Oscar Buzz. Basically, as a kid, I would watch the Oscars with my parents a lot because I knew they liked it, and it was always something that I was intrigued by because I always liked movies, but I didn't truly, really get into it until the double whammy of 2009 and 2010, when the very first time I ever watched the Oscar nominations live was 2009, and I still remember my reaction of seeing that Up was nominated for Best Picture and freaking out, because even then I knew that Beauty and the Beast was the only animated film to ever get on. And it was kind of exciting because I was very young, and the fact that a film that I had watched had made it in Best Picture was really exciting. And then the next year it happened again with Toy Story 3, and I was like, okay, this is just going to happen. The Academy is going to recognize animated films and live-action films together, and that hasn't happened. And for a few years, there weren't a ton of major contenders on the level of Up in Toy Story 3. Frozen was big, but I was kind of like, they're not going to go for that. But when Inside Out happened in 2015, the whole year I was like, okay, this is going to happen. And by then, I was really, really into the Oscars, and I was looking at all of the precursor stuff. And I was noticing just how hard it was for an animated film to get recognition. For example, this was back when Golden Globes could not nominate animated films for Best Picture. And they can now, but they haven't since that rule change. And Inside Out definitely would have made that comedy musical lineup if it had been eligible. And there were a whole bunch of stuff where they had best stuff in a film and then best stuff in an animated film. There was always that subgenre asterisk that Inside Out would get nominated for, and there were so many barriers that it hit. Even though it was so many people's favorite film of the year, it was in the top 10 for a lot of critics, and it could not get that nomination. And I remembered going online and like saying something on a forum that was like, I can't believe Inside Out didn't get nominated for Best Picture, and someone replied, I thought it was nominated. And I said, it was nominated for Best Animated Feature, and then they said, oh, same thing. No, it is not the same thing. It is not the same thing at all. And then I remember just being so frustrated about that, but thinking that it couldn't go on forever. And the next year when Zootopia came out, and that movie was just all, it was relevant. It was like this social commentary on racial prejudice. And I was like, ooh, this is what the Oscars like. And this is like, everyone loved the movie, so I was thinking it would happen. I was thinking that would get a Best Picture nomination. And I spent most of that year trying to campaign on behalf of Zootopia to get into Best Picture, and it didn't. And then the following year was Coco. And the thing was, Coco came out later in the year, so there was no like big push early on. By the time I saw the movie, I already knew that no one was trying to make Coco happen in Best Picture. And when I walked out of the movie, Coco happens to be one of my favorite movies of all time. And the thing is, as much as I love the movie, every time I think about it, there's always this part of me that is just absolutely baffled that no one even tried to get it nominated for Best Picture. It didn't get anything, like no precursors. Everyone who talked about the movie, and everyone loved the movie. It wasn't like I was alone in a corner somewhere. Everyone was like, oh, Coco is amazing. This is so good, like 98 or something % of Rotten Tomatoes. Everyone loved it. Best Animated Feature, and maybe Best Song, and then the conversation stopped. No one thought it should get in for Picture, and I get that 2017 was a great year for movies, but still, no one tried to make it happen in Picture or Screenplay or Production Design. And that was the first time that I really started to become disillusioned by the Oscars, because I was like, how can you not see that this is one of the year's best films? Like, how are you not, or do you know that this is one of the year's best films, but you just don't care because it has a category where you can reward it? And then right after that was when the Academy started being really generous towards international features, and we started seeing movies pop up in an international feature and picture, and I was like, okay, great. Why can't you do the same for animated films? And so there was a while where I just didn't predict animated films. Spider-Verse, the original Spider-Verse, came on very late in the scene, and a lot of people just, that was the year of Black Panther, so that was a big deal. That movie was becoming the first superhero movie to get nominated for Best Picture, and so no one was going to make the case for Spider-Verse because, oh, we have a superhero movie in Best Picture. Like, we can't get two in, don't be crazy. Even though Spider-Verse definitely should have gotten in. And then in 2020, I was someone who, I never had any faith in Soul as a Best Picture nominee, even though other people tried to convince me that it could happen. And it's kind of ridiculous in hindsight because that movie, it's almost like Pixar was trying to get a Best Picture nomination because they were doing something that was more adult and more existential than what they usually do. And it was a pandemic year. Like, there was so many, all the big spectacle movies got postponed. So, like, surely if there was any movie that would have a shot, it was this one. And it just didn't. And then just when Pinocchio happened, and you can listen to my prediction videos, I wasn't gonna fall for it. I wasn't gonna fall for it. People were like, this could happen. I fell for it, and then egg was on my face when no one would nominate it. And of course, it only got the one nomination for animated feature. And that hurt. It did hurt. But I did kind of get over it, maybe because I didn't love the movie as much as a lot of other people did. But when it happened this year, again, I told myself there's no way it's going to happen the same thing is going to happen 2 years in a row. Because people are already upset about Pinocchio, and people love this movie so much. Martin Scorsese was calling this film a life-changing experience, and we all know how he feels about superhero movies. It beat Past Lives for picture and director at the HCA Mid-Season Awards, and even as we were getting closer to nominations, I looked at the Critics Guilds and all the regional awards. So many Critics Guilds had it in their top 10 of the year, and some even had it in their top 5. Clearly, this was a movie that everyone really loved. And the funny thing is, if it had gotten a PGA nomination, which a lot of people were predicting it would, then I would have had it in my 10. I think that would have been enough to make me go, okay, I'm predicting it for Best Picture. But it didn't. And so I kind of had this dejected moment of, okay, it's not going to happen. And then going into the Oscar nominations, I was like, at least it's going to get in for score. Like, again, I would not be making this video if it had gotten in for score because at the very least, it did better than Pinocchio did. So we're moving a step in the right direction. But it didn't get score. And it was so widely predicted to get in score because it was so many people had nominated it, so many guilds had nominated it, and no guilds had nominated Indiana Jones. Like, not a single regional critics group nominated John Williams for Indiana Jones. And so I didn't think it was going to happen, but they went for that. And do we really need to give John Williams like his 54th nomination for Indiana Jones 5? That sounds like a joke, but it's not. That's how many nominations he has. Instead, we gotta ignore Spider-Verse. And I could accept that if Boy and the Heron got on, or if Elemental got on. There were other options. But for whatever reason, the Oscars just didn't want to go there. And here's the thing that really bothers me about all this, is this idea that animated movies are for kids. And we saw this a couple years ago when they were presenting the category, and they sort of talked about this. Animated movies are for kids to love and adults to tolerate. And first of all, they said this the same year that one of the nominated movies was Flea, which is a little, yeah. But outside of that, it's just the Academy has shown that they are willing to nominate family oriented films if they're live action. We've seen movies like Mary Poppins, Babe, Hugo, this year with Barbie. Barbie is a family film. And that got a Best Picture nomination, and it's so beloved. And for the record, I think Barbie is a great movie. But if Barbie were animated, it would not be nominated for Best Picture. And I don't know why people have this speculation of because it's animated, it's not real, because animated films can make you feel real emotions. And I think this idea of like, if you can't watch animated movies by yourself if you're an adult. Like, if you're watching an animated movie by yourself and there's no kid present, but you can get meaningful things from an animated film, just as meaningful as you can from a live action film. And let's look at the nominees this year. Spider-Verse, Martin Scorsese called it a life-changing experience. It is powerful the way that it frames its story, and it doesn't seem like a movie that's talking down to kids at all. It seems to even go beyond what we're seeing in a lot of live-action superhero movies. A lot of the big live-action superhero movies this year failed with critics and at the box office, but Spider-Verse was the movie that showed that there's still some life in that genre. And it's animated. And I think it's funny because people like to complain in a lot of Marvel stuff about how, oh, everything is CGI, and that never seems to come up for animated movies in which everything is literally CGI, but it's this whole thing of when you have an actor against a green screen, you're like expected to believe that it's real. This is opening a whole other can of worms that I didn't want to get into, but animated movies can be impactful. You see what Spider-Verse does, and it's more impactful than what a lot of the live action films this year did in terms of the superhero genre. And if they had tried to do the script for Spider-Verse in live action, I'm not saying it wouldn't have been good, but maybe it wouldn't have felt as natural. And you look at something like The Boy and the Heron, also nominated this year. That's not a kid's movie at all. That's a very existentialist film with a lot of heavy themes, and it's told from Miyazaki, who's nearing the end of his life and is looking back on it, and it's very mature. And yes, there are fantastical elements in it, but it's using the medium of animation to tell a story for adults that adults can take something away from. And then look at something like Nimona. That's a film where, because it's the medium of animation, you can more easily tell this story about a character who is a shapeshifter. But you can use that to create this metaphor about people who do not confine to gender norms and how those people are looked at by society. And that movie is legitimately powerful and legitimately heart-wrenching. And I have not seen Robot Dreams yet. I'm going to try to rectify that as soon as possible, but I've heard from people who have seen it that the vibe and the feeling of that movie is very similar to something like Past Lives, which really intrigues me. And clearly people would not be saying this if it were just a kid's movie. Even Elemental, which is probably the most child-friendly movie on this list, even that has this theme of like being the child of immigrant parents, and how do you honor their sacrifice while also wanting to do something with your own life. And yes, I'm not saying that kids can't watch these movies, because they definitely can, but to think that only kids can get something from this movie is just being very naive. Especially when you have something like Barbie that is up for Best Picture, and as much as I like the movie, you cannot tell me that Barbie is a more adult film than Boy and the Heron. I think even Spider-Verse is a little bit more emotionally mature, and that's not an insult to Barbie, it's just because something is animated does not mean it's not real, I guess is the word. Like, I'm just gonna bring up Flea from a few years ago. Flea is a documentary, but we're seeing stories about this person's real life. And the movie uses the medium of animation partly because they don't want to reveal this identity of the person, but also because when we see flashbacks to this person's life growing up and the things that they had to endure. We could do that in live action. We could do live action reenactments, but somehow it would feel phony because we know that these are actors that are recreating something from this person's life, and we will be looking for holes. We will be looking for the parts that were recreated. And somehow the fact that it's animated paradoxically makes it feel more real because it feels like you're inside a memory. And we can sort of fill in, yeah, we know that these are drawings, but the emotions of everything hit us so much harder. And this is done in the same manner and the same animation type that the non-flashbacks are, the interview scenes are. And so it all feels cohesive, it all feels natural, and animated movies can do things that live action can't. Animation can really make you believe in, it can make you suspend your disbelief a lot more. For example, there's a lot of people who say that they don't like musicals, and movie musicals, when they watch a movie musical and the characters are bursting out into song, is unnatural because people don't do that in real life. However, you ever notice that these same people don't seem to have this problem when it comes to Disney animated musicals? Like, they can watch Beauty and the Beast and Lion King, and they can enjoy it, and it doesn't seem as weird that the characters are singing because the characters are also animated, and you can more easily suspend your disbelief to believe that they would sing. I don't know, there's just something about the animation medium that because we, the audience, know that it's not real compared to live action photography that tries to feel as real as possible a lot of the time. And I'm not saying that live action movies are inherently not as good as animated, because there's obviously many, many very good live action movies, but animation should not be discounted. You can't say that a movie is lesser than purely because it's animated. When Beauty and the Beast was the first animated movie to be nominated for Best Picture, there was backlash at the time. And at the Oscars, the host Billy Crystal sort of made this joke about how, oh, if a movie with movable paintings can get nominated, it looks like us actors will be out of a job. And he's kidding around, obviously, but it still feels weird because it's kind of like, well, you can't sit with us, like, this is not a real movie, and if these movies thrive, I mean, that's the root of all prejudice, is this lie that if we give them a seat at the table, there won't be any room left for us. And I'm not trying to imply that the prejudice against animated films is as serious as many other real-world types of prejudice. All I'm saying is that this is a prejudice that exists. And we need to acknowledge that it exists so that we can, there's always opportunity to do better. And okay, if I'm gonna wrap this all up with a nice little bow, I will be okay. I will get over this. I will, obviously I will make my Oscar nomination a breakdown of, no, not a breakdown of nominations, but I will do my daily prediction videos as we get closer to the Oscars, the way I do every year. But I do want to acknowledge that this did kind of break me in a way. And I just really want, it's great to see the Oscars becoming more international and rewarding different types of movies, but I wish they could just acknowledge that animated films are movies too, and do deserve to be treated with the same level of respect or dignity. And if you want to argue that such and such is for children, that doesn't seem to be, I have a lot more to say on this topic, and I'm curious if you'd be interested to hear more, because last year I was actually seriously contemplating the idea of starting a podcast that was basically going to be me breaking down the nominees for Best Animated Feature every year, and going in depth about these films, reviewing them, and analyzing them, giving them the same level of in-depth analysis you would see for a lot of live action films, and then asking, was this movie how many other nominations did it get outside of animated feature? If it didn't get any, did it deserve to get more? And that was the gist behind the podcast. The main reason why I ended up not doing it, well, partially because I was very busy, and also because as of right now, I don't have a co-host, and it was just going to be me talking by myself, and I don't know if that would be interesting, just hear me ramble on about animated movies by myself. But let me know if that's something you'd actually be interested in in seeing. I feel like this whole thing is to become a plug for this podcast. It's not, but I do kind of want to gauge interest in whether or not that would be something you'd want to listen to, or whether or not it would work if I got a co-host. Anyone want to be a co-host? Oh God. Okay, I just wanted to air out my thoughts on this because this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I just want the Academy to do better. So, yeah.